boundaries anymore. Threaten them with the police and they'll laugh at you. Little hooligans." John's nod was perfunctory. "Did you see anyone around here before the fire?" "We were all tucked up in bed, fast asleep," Lewis said. "Busy time this, up and out long before dawn." "Well, let's just be thankful no more harm was done. Nice to meet you, Mr. Rhodes. Take care." He left the farmer, shaking his head over his lost pallets. John knew just how lucky this particular farmer had been. If the stack had been next to a barn, as they often were, and the barn close to the farmhouse, he might be mourning the loss of his family. He opened the boot of his Land Rover and replaced his Wellingtons with a pair of shoes. With one final look back, he put the car into gear and pulled out into the Greenborough Road. It was time to talk to an old acquaintance of his. Detective Nikki Galena had started work early, hoping to slope off mid-afternoon and spend some time with her mother. Eve Anderson had been working all spring and summer to get a new fern garden laid out, and now that it was almost finished, she wanted Nikki to see it before the evenings got too dark. Her mother's new home, a converted chapel in the village of Beech Lacey, was a real showplace. Prior to inheriting the beautiful old chapel, Eve had known nothing about gardening, but now she was a born-again Gertrude Jekyll. Nikki smiled to herself. At least it kept her out of trouble, and boy did her mother need it. She shivered when she considered the danger Eve had been in last year. Her new role as head gardener was much safer than that of private investigator. Nikki went back to the reports that she needed to get ready for the new superintendent. This was to be his first day, and she and the whole team were on tenterhooks, wondering what he would be like. Rumour had it that he was a fast-track university swot from the direct entry program, who didn't look old enough to drive, let alone take on the responsibility for all the operations in their division. Through the grapevine was often wrong. Only time would tell. Nikki glanced at her watch. A couple of hours, to be precise. After the sudden death of Superintendent Greg Woodhull, they had muddled through, with everyone temporarily stepping up a post. Today they would be back to full strength, whatever that might mean. Nikki grimaced. A new super, especially one who needed to prove something, or maybe just make his presence felt, could be a big problem for her and Joseph. Ranking officers were not allowed to work together if they were married or in a personal relationship, and she and DS Joseph Easter were now in a relationship. For a very long time, for the sake of the team and their working partnership, they had remained just friends. Then, following a traumatic case that affected both of them badly, they had decided that life was just too short. They had never actually moved in together. Joseph retained his quaint knot cottage, and she still lived in her family home, Cloud Cottage Farm, but they spent most of their time together. They hadn't made a thing of it. In fact, they never spoke about it at all. Canny Superintendent Greg Woodhull had chosen to ignore the rumours, well aware that half the station believed they'd been a couple for years, while the other half didn't give a damn. But a new super? Nikki wasn't sure how things were going to pan out. She loved her job, and had no intention of losing it. But equally she loved Joseph, and didn't want to lose him either. If her new commanding officer asked her outright, she wouldn't be able to lie. Maybe he wouldn't find out how close she and Joseph were. It was all she could hang on to. They always drove to work in separate vehicles, and they always appeared slightly distant when in company. So it was now in the lap of the gods. There was a soft tap at her door. She looked up, expecting to see Joseph, but it was Sergeant Niall Farrow, Joseph's son-in-law. When she saw Niall, Nikki always had to look twice. She still thought of him as the young, gung-ho constable who had joined them years before, all fired up and full of enthusiasm that sometimes clouded his common sense. But now he was a responsible man. He had a wife, a home, and 3 stripes on his shoulder, and it made Nikki's heart sing. She had a very good reason for being especially fond of him. She owed him her life, although he still hotly denied it.